If you come back in here, I'm gonna hit you with so many rights, you're gonna beg for a left.
Welcome to Film Strip. Featuring Ron.
You're beginning to irritate me.
And Jay.
Oh, man. Nobody knows how to find him. He's on the move all the time.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I am Ron.
And this is our review of Invasion U.S.A., starring Chuck Norris, Richard Lynch, Melissa Prophet, and Alex Colon. Directed by Joseph Zito, released in 1985 on a budget of $12 million, all spent on C4. It grossed $17.5 million at the box office. Now, we kind of teased that we were going to do this one back a few weeks ago, Ron, when we had done the American Ninja quadrilogy, I guess we want to call that.
Sure.
And so we, said, hey, let's go out here and pick up these two films, because I had no idea that Invasion USA had a sequel. And indeed it does. And I have strong memories of seeing this as a kid. I think my dad rented it for me because he knew I liked Chuck Norris and he thought I would dig the Chuck Norris movies. It was Chuck Norris holding two Uzis on I think it's the poster or whatever, two Mac 10s. And I remember watching this and not really getting it. And I remember my father going, oh, this is a little darker than I thought it was going to be. And I know I saw it several times. It was on Showtime and stuff, growing up. And I know I've seen it a lot, but I don't know that I'd ever paid attention to it critically until we decided to review it here, and ended up watching it a couple of times for this, because I'll be honest with you, I really thought I remembered this film, and I really did not.
I remembered one thing about it, and that was the Blues Brothers pickup truck driving through the mall scene.
Who could forget that? So definitely a memorable scene. But like I said, I did see this one, at a young age, probably younger than I should have been, but I did see it. When did you first pick up on Invasion USA?
Now, I don't think I saw this one until a lot later. Like, I remember more like the missing in action-y kind of Chuck Norris flicks that were more common on TV. So I don't think I caught this one until I was already, relatively, probably significantly older than you were, because I was probably a teenager catching it on cable, entranced by the idea of Chuck Norris firing two micro Uzis.
Indeed. I mean, how can that not get anyone on? I mean, come on. But oddly enough, he only has those for a very short amount of time in the film. You'd think it's his main weapon. It's really not. So, and the way he fires them so indiscriminately at things, it's kind of, I don't know. We'll talk about it as we get into it. But, I think you and I are kind of making a tour de force through either every Golden Globus action film ever made or ones that at least should have been. So at different times. Is this another Golden Globus film? Is this a canon? This is Canon Films again, right?
Yes, this is definitely another Canon film. In case you couldn't tell by the fact that they shot it in the swamp.
It literally is shot in the Southeast. Now, that's the funny thing to me. I did not pick up on any of that as a kid. And seeing this now, I'm like, well, I think I've driven through most of these places. And my Atlanta has changed quite a bit since 1984 and 85. I mean, traffic's still bad, but sheesh. I mean, it's amazing some of the stuff that goes on. And what gets me about this movie, what really, I mean, just laugh out loud funny to me, is this was released in the early fall. It came out like September, October-ish. But it's like set partially, I think, at Christmas or something. At least it seems that way.
It seems like it seems like it's a very Christmas-centric movie. Because I can't explain why there would be so many people at the mall otherwise.
Yeah, I know, like shopping, and like people are dressed in the deep South, dressed for deep winter. Now, I know you grew up in the South in Kentucky, but that's even different geography than like where I grew up and where like Anna's from, where it's really hot like all the time, all the way up to like November or so. So we don't wear sweaters at Christmas time. I mean, it's just not
the Christmas T-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got my Christmas running shorts on. I mean, that's generally how that goes. I don't see it any other way. So that was funny to me, but certainly a lot for us to get into here. And I want to say this, for a Golden Globus flick, $12 million. I just want to know how much of that Chuck got. Because, I mean, they had to have paid him a serious amount of that money. It's not on the screen, unless, like I joked, they did use it all on the plastique.
Yeah, it's probably half plastique, half Chuck Norris.
It is stunning.
I mean, he was a big star at this point. I mean,
oh yeah.
Not that he's not, a fairly big star now, or at least a very popular internet meme.
I'm about to say, yeah, he's his own meme now, man. He's like that's above stardom. I mean, when you've got that, you're doing it all.
I did like his cameo his extended cameo in Expendables 2, where he's doing the Invasion USA thing, but with two M16 lookalikes instead of the two micro Uzis.
I think he has more lines in Expendables 2 than he does in this movie, and he's the star. So, I mean, really, I don't. It's amazing the lack of dialogue in this film. I guess we'll get into that as we go. But why don't I take a shot at the yield plot summary this time, and we'll talk about it in more detail as we get into it. So here's the deal about Invasion USA. You have to put yourself in a mindset, folks, of like the pre-9/11, I think even like the pre-Clinton years, what America was like, okay? And why this would have shocked everyone to death. Because here's what I'm about to read to you now will seem so farcical. But in 1985, this was passed for high drama, I want to tell you. A group of terrorists unleash a series of violent attacks in the southeastern United States. Their leader, a mysterious man named Rostov, is haunted by dreams of the CIA agent he once faced and escaped barely. That agent, the now retired and reclusive Matt Hunter, is hiding out in Florida's Everglades. When Rostov's troops attack, the CIA reaches out to Hunter, and Rostov even makes an attempt on his old adversary. Drawn back into the tradecraft he swore to abandon, Hunter goes about thwarting the guerrillas' attempts to further disrupt American life by attacking people in their communities. While the U.S.'s 50 governors form a centralized task force in Atlanta to take on the bulk of the threat, Hunter and Rostov play cat and mouse in an office building downtown. Eventually, Hunter sneaks up behind Rostov and shoots him with a rocket launcher, uttering for the 150th time, "It's time," before Rostov can fire his own. The guerrilla troops are defeated by the military, and Hunter stares out the window as Rostov's remains burn into the night, and the credits roll. And that's about as quick as I can sum up what goes down in Invasion USA. And I think we just have to start from the beginning here, Ron. And I mean, this is a very jarring beginning to this film. You see these Cuban refugees, on a boat sailing for the United States, and they're met up with the U.S. Coast Guard, who then open fire upon them and lay waste to them so that they can steal what looks to be like about 100 kilos of coke off the bottom of the boat.
Yeah, because clearly it's the 80s. Every subplot has to involve cocaine.
It's coming in Miami. I mean, Billy Corbin, the great documentary filmmaker, would agree with us that this is true to life for Miami. So, yeah, but really, I mean, talk about throwing you out of your seat. You have Richard Lynch, I mean, who is most assuredly not a foreigner, but has played a Russian so many times that I used to believe he really was one until many years later. It was Brian and I he had a bit part of the Rob Zombie Halloween film, but I knew him from a lot of things growing up, and just a good character actor, always playing a bad guy. I mean, it seems to be his lot in life to play the bad guy. But for years, I thought he was for it because he just, there's something about that face, man. It looks like a mask.
Yeah, he looks very Slavic, I guess.
Yeah, very, and his speech is that way. It's all done because we don't really get to know a lot of the backstory of old Rostov here. It's sort of piecemealed out to us through the film. But what's amazing is that they pull the one guy off the boat, and like everybody gets shot. The kids, the women, the men, everybody gets gunned down, and Rostov has to make them like stop shooting.
Yeah, they're clearly enjoying the whole murder thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty violent. And I was also reminded of something here that, we haven't talked about a ton, but we can get into now, because I don't think the American Ninja films, those were kind of Saturday morning cartoonish, with their violence for the most part, especially like that part 3 and stuff.
Right.
This one is, I mean, it's is big time violent. Like there is blood and gore on the screen. Right, I mean, people are getting shot. It is quite jarring to look at right out of the gate, I think.
Yeah, it kind of sets a good, well, not a good tone, but it sets the tone that the movie's obviously going for by being super like nihilistic and bloody right off the bat. I mean, clearly that's a really cheap way to establish that Rostov is not, someone to be trifled with, and these guys are clearly dangerous dudes.
Yeah, the thing is we don't really know what they're doing. Like, we come to learn that they steal these drugs because they essentially sell them for, like, arms or something like that. Like, even in the 80s, it was easy to get guns in America. Like, I don't know why they had to go through the elaborate Scarface plot to buy their army.
Yeah, I mean, you could get this is still back when you could get like the fully automatic M16 with the tax stamp for like $500.
Exactly. Yeah. You could buy everything that they use, and in fact, there's a joke in the film that all their military equipment is like retired Korean War material that they bought like from apparently like an Ollie North type or something. That's what we're led to believe, which I did find to be quite funny that they threw that in there. But
it's funny because I just pulled up the IMFDB page for this movie, which is really as long as your arm and probably longer than the script. One of the terrorists is using a bolt-action Mauser rifle from the German Imperial Army circa 1900.
That is amazing. I will say this: if you're a gun person, this is your movie. I like it is as a kid, like, action movies, I was always obsessed with the Hardware 2. I thought that was cool and all that stuff. But this movie is all about the bang bang shoot 'em up. I mean, there's every kind of weapon in the world. The Internet Firearm Movie Database, if y'all ever looked that one up, folks, it's a field day with this film. Like, there's every kind of thing known to man here. But what I don't get, and what I'm trying to establish here, I'm looking for help from you, is what is the centralized plot here? Like, I'm not sure what the terrorist plot is.
I believe that their plot is to destabilize the American government through what appears to be like a massive guerrilla warfare terrorist style series of attacks spread throughout the country, and we only get the Georgia, Miami, Florida, whatever portion, because that's the only portion where Matt Hunter is.
Okay.
But from what my understanding is, this is happening throughout the country, and that's why in all the news breaks it talks about how chaotic everything is, and so-and-so 15 people are dead in New York City or what have you. I mean, we're focused in the Southeast, but it was my understanding that this is happening all over the place.
Okay, see, that's interesting. I did not get that from this, but I've never understood this to be like a nationwide problem. I thought, what a weird way to try to take over the country by coming in through the Southeast. Like, I grew up like a lot of people playing the game of Risk, the game of global domination, and no one comes through the U.S. to try to take anything. Everyone knows the Australian gambit is the way you win that game. And so, I mean, that's either that or you get Africa. So, I mean, that's how you win that game. But I don't know. I always thought it was weird. And then again, on the watching this time, I got it like you did in all the little news briefs that pop up that it's happening nationwide, and this is just what we're sort of localized in on here in this particular story. That's the funny thing to me too, or the interesting thing, is that most of the exposition is not handled by the characters in this film. It's handled by the news cuts.
Kind of like RoboCop, how RoboCop uses the media break and the little television clips to set up a world.
Except not nearly as effective, if I may say so. So, RoboCop served to be a satire, right? This is all played straight.
It may as well be a satire because of how brainless it is, but it's. I can only imagine that this was inspired by the Mariel boat lift, where all the Cuban refugees came swarming in, and the fear that when I was a kid, all I heard was like Castro opened up the prisons and the insane asylums, and he just put them all on boats and send them over to America.
It dumped everybody over here, all of his worst nightmares and problems. Yeah. So I always heard the same thing too. So I do think that's what this is playing off of. And they have some lines in there about how like, oh, we're going to bring America to its knees by using its own freedom against it. And that's why they're saying about all the guns and stuff. But for the real clear to me in this first act is that for Rostov, this is all about like, he's got a side agenda for sure, right? Like he wants to get revenge on the guy that has haunted him in his dreams for years. He wants to take out his old adversary, Matt Hunter, and invading America is just kind of a byproduct of that mission.
This is his Cobra Commander style vendetta against one man.
Yes.
To the detriment of the mission, because everybody's like, well, we can just, blah, 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 let's just ignore him. And Rostov clearly is not going to take that, even if Matt Hunter wasn't apparently interrupting every one of their activities in the area.
Yeah, and I mean, they definitely will come back to that in what Hunter does, but that's the kick at the end of the first act is that you learn that Rostov is a man that is haunted by. It looked like, I don't know if that was a real occasion or if it's just what he assumed happens. We never really get a true flashback of those two facing off against each other, but every time it's a scene with Chuck Norris holding a gun to his head and with that one line,
"It's time."
And I think that's the only thing Chuck says for like at least 3/4 of the film.
If you count every time he says that as one line of dialogue, the amount of dialogue in the movie triples.
I mean, really, it's like that's all they gave him to say. Or somewhere in the production of this, he said, "Look, I'll do this, but you're going to pay me a lot, and I'm just going to say this one thing. I like this. I'm hanging on to this line. This line is my line." Let's talk about Chuck Norris just for a sidebar for a moment. Where are you on Chuck Norris movies?
I think this is probably the best usage of Chuck Norris you could get at this time period, because they don't make him try to have a romantic subplot with anyone really, and they don't make him do any like emoting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I enjoy most of the Chuck Norris films that I've come across too. I was a big fan of his kung fu films. I like those. I've always found those to be quite interesting films and lots of fun to revisit from time to time. But you're right. The worst thing you can ask Chuck Norris to do is to not be a robot. Because that's essentially what he is in this. I think that's actually the failing of some of the mission and action films is they try to give him way too much to do. And really, he really just, I mean, he is a presence. I mean, that meme is for a reason. And I honestly think this film has a lot to do with the length and the strength of that meme that Chuck Norris can do anything. And with a gleeful smile and dead tone in his voice the whole time.
Yeah, I have no doubt that this movie is a significant influence on those memes, because his beard is really concealing another fist in this movie, and that fist is holding a gun.
Yes, a Mac 10, as it were. So, but I love how, though, the CIA tries to get him back in, and now these plots, this was littered throughout the 80s. The good guy has gone into hiding. I mean, think about Commando. I think Rambo 2 is pretty much this plot. I mean, this gets recycled over and over and over again. So, but I actually kind of liked it because he blew them off. And that's the plot in every one of those films. I'm not interested until all of a sudden you get interested. But in all of those other ones, like there's some personal reason to get in. Like for Rambo, it's you can go back and win Vietnam, Rambo. And for Commando, it's they take Alyssa Milano, and Schwarzenegger's not going to let that happen. So, and to every teenage boy my age at the time, I was like, yes, go.
Clearly,
yes, go save her. But for Chuck Norris, they kill his alligator hunting friend and blow up his house in the Everglades. You reckon that mortgage was at least $12,000?
Yeah.
I mean, look, people can live how they want to. I live simply too. I'm down for that. Fine. But, I'm like, what did he lose? He didn't even have electricity. He had candles.
Didn't he have a bar?
He had a bar, but
but the house was
the house was
maybe they killed his armadillo died.
That he did have the pet armadillo, though I saw it running around the wreckage and looking at the dead friend's body.
Okay, good.
So the armadillo, no armadillos were harmed in the filming of Invasion USA. But now that's the thing, and that does lead us to the end of the first act. The CIA guy comes to get him out of retirement. we think this is Rostov, and he does have a good line. It's better than its time. It's, you should have let me kill him when I had the chance. And then it just, like, instead of cutting the way it should have, you have him sort of awkwardly half walk out of the scene, and then it cuts. And I was like, well, somebody was clearly drunk in the editing room or in a real hurry, because that was bad. But I like that move, because that makes me, as I know what I'm getting when I pop this film in. I know, look, I know I'm in for action ghetto here, so can it at least be entertaining? And that engages me, because I'm like, well, what is their past? The problem is they never freaking explain it at all. What is Rostov and Hunter's past?
Clearly they want to kill each other.
I mean, were they Blofeld and Bond or something?
Probably. I mean, he does use Rostov is wearing a suit. Maybe he is supposed to be like the super villainy type.
Yeah, he's got on a white suit too, so he's like, I don't know. He's supposed to be like, again, Miami. That's funny. He's supposed to be like Russian or something, we think, but I don't know. He's hanging out in Miami. It's very strange what's going on with the Rostov here for sure. But I don't know. I find that to be engaging again. And I think what really gets me here and what I like is that this first act kind of drags around. This middle part, I really get into the film, because what the terrorists go and do here is, and not to make a light of it, is essentially what real terrorists go and do to cause havoc in their world. And it's sort of timely. I mean, coming off of the end of 2014, we had the whole Ferguson thing in this country. And, nowadays we keep up with the global news. The kind of stuff that these guys do, like going around and blowing up churches and shooting people's houses full of rockets while they're hanging out with their kids at night and blowing up the school buses and all this stuff, is the kind of stuff that real terrorists do. And on smaller levels has happened in America in our lifetime. So watching this now with that perspective gives this much more weight than I think it did at its time.
Then it was probably more of a shocking thing, because it didn't seem like something that can happen in real life. Or alternately, it was an easy way for people to dismiss the movie as just being dumb, because there's no way you could get a rocket in Miami. You can't start a race riot just by gunning down a party of Cubans or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, they roll up dressed as cops and shoot the Cubans.
Yeah, or some sort of Hispanic. I'm not sure if they were Cubans or not, but since it's Miami, I can only assume that they were Cubans.
Yeah, we're gonna go with Cubans. So on that, or Haitians or whatever, they're Latinos in the Miami area, and they do that, like you said, because they're dressed up as cops. Now, when the real cops show up, what happens? The remaining crowd throws rocks at them, and they basically just run off and leave the people because they're not going to deal with that. Yeah,
they run them off. It's a pretty effective example of mob violence. You see this a lot. This seems like it's happening a lot in Iraq too. To destabilize the central government, you turn sect against sect. In this case, you turn Cubans or whatever Hispanics against the police department, the people who were there to actually stop the crimes. And I believe this is what they did in other locations as well. They kind of did this. I have no doubt they did this throughout the country, because there's a lot of talk of race riots and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean they go on and on about that, and I actually do think that's one of the neater parts of that exposition heavy newscast that keep bumping in from time to time, is that it gives us a sense of just how grand scale this thing is. But what's amazing to me is, and I think it is the limitations of the budget or whatever, we don't even get a good map of Rostov and Nico sitting there drawing around going well, the Colorado front is going real well. And, I mean, they seem to only be in their little area. So it makes me wonder, is there somebody above Rostov that's, supposed to be leading this group? Is it coming out of somewhere else? Or are they really just an offshoot of mercenaries?
They're not really acting. I mean, they seem to act like Rostov is the most important person in the whole operation.
Right.
So I don't see.
He's not protected like he is, though. That's the problem.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe he's too much of a loose cannon to. Maybe he keeps shaking off his protection detail.
I guess I could see that because he does shoot the one guy, multiple times in the crotch when he gets mad at him. So, which was
that's not a good way to engender loyalty among your followers.
no, it's not. But it is a good way to make them scared of you. So, if that's what you want to inspire, if that look on your face as if you just walked out of a fire didn't do it, then that certainly would accomplish that goal, Rostov. But I don't know. I love I don't love it. I like these attacks though because it does give what they do weight. Most of the time in these kind of movies, like the success of the bad guys is always seemed to be very limited, right? And in this one, I mean, they raise hell all through the Southeast with the you mentioned the race ride in Miami. They go to I think that's supposed to be like northern Florida or southern Georgia or something. They go to the neighborhood and like literally kids are putting the star and Jesus on the Christmas tree and somebody fires an RPG into the house. And I know rocket propelled grenades can do a lot of damage. I don't know they could blow up a 1,500 square foot house like that, but it did look cool, and it does give that sense of gravity to just how dangerous these guys are.
The dad had a very big turpentine manufacturing plant in his garage. So, yeah, that's clearly what made the house explode. It was the first meth lab explosion in Florida.
That is an excellent point. I hadn't thought about that. So it definitely could have been Heisenberg's house for all we know. So because that was some straight up Malcolm in the Middle style, neighborhood that they had going on there. So that was the house of Mr. Joseph Meth, inventor of meth. There we go. But yeah, that's the thing that gets me is how I don't know how the terrorists are to start with. Like I found that to be, I don't know, jarring a little bit because again, like they usually don't have that level of success when they're, in their initial attacks. They usually get one quick hit and then they're done. And in this case, I don't know. It just seemed like they got a lot more damage done before it finally got Rostov out. And let me ask you, is it just the killing of his friend, or is it the killing of his friend and compounded on top of all of the other stuff he's seeing on the news that gets him out of retirement?
I think it's simply the killing of his friend because, I mean, he knew that bad things were happening. I mean, I don't think he missed, I don't think Matt Hunter missed the news for all that time. I think really, from the way he behaves, it seems like it's a personal vendetta. I mean, yes, he does save some school bus full of children and stuff, but he also just kind of indiscriminately starts firing his Uzis at the mall. So it seems to me like it's just a purely personal, let's get Rostov kind of thing, and each little activity he interrupts is another step closer to drawing Rostov out.
Well, and that's what he says to the CIA suit at the little diner hut or whatever that he leaves, 3 minutes before it gets attacked. How convenient. And so that he's like, okay, but I'll work alone. And I was like, well, okay, no, I don't think that's going to fly. So I think they're going to be like, yeah, okay, whatever. You're taking somebody with you this time. So you got to call in, you got to check in with us, something, And I don't know. It was just sort of weird because the thing is that when Chuck Norris goes into CIA mode here, man, like he just sort of pops in and out of scenery, like as if he were to just appear and reappear in different places. He doesn't seem to have like a base of operation. That's what gets me.
He seems to magically show up whenever there's trouble.
Yeah, that's really, really odd. It's like he knows exactly where they're going to go. And that's what gets me. I'm like, was this like a plot that Rostov maybe told him about over drinks or something sometime? And he's like, well, I remember they said they were going to go after the mall, so that's where I'm going to go next. And then they were going to go after the school, so I'm going to, talk, cute with that reporter redneck lady and then independent journalist lady and then, let her hit on me while I walk away in disgust, after I save her life and murder other people for no reason. I don't know. It's strange.
I like to think that it's in a smarter movie. I think that would have been a sign of just how widespread the activities are, that you literally cannot go anywhere without something terrible happening pretty much anywhere you go. In this movie, I think they didn't have any real urge to shoot filler scenes.
Yeah, there is none. Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
they decided to just have him walk from or drive from terrorist attack to terrorist attack, just completely willy-nilly without even bothering to have much plot aside from throwing Billy Drago out a window.
I had a friend in high school that had a truck very similar to the one Matt Hunter drives, and every time I saw him coming, I would just sort of hum the theme in my head privately, because I sort of knew what was happening. It was very funny. But yeah, you're right. He just sort of drives around place to place. He seems to thwart all these attacks. And some of them are humorous, though. Like, you've got everybody running into the church and stuff. And like, this is very, again, having grown up in the South, like, I remember when there were national tragedies and stuff, like, the church would just open up and everybody would just come in, and we would just have like a prayer service. It was just a place where people could go and be together was the whole point of it. And so that's very much part of like Southern culture, I think, and stuff. And so I see that and I'm going like, yeah, we're probably been in that one, and they've got the bomb set up outside of it. And when it doesn't work, what is amazing is the amount of time these guys give him to drop it back down on them and go, must have been something wrong with it. It'll work now. And like, he drops it, they look at it, then he reconnects the wires, fixes a ham sandwich, and it blows up. I mean, it's one of the it's hilarious. But I remember that being in like the television trailers, but they cut it faster. It was like him dropping the suitcase, the guy's turning around, and then boom, he'd hit the wires and it would explode. But it didn't have the comedy in the middle, and that's what makes it work. Otherwise I'd be like, this movie is so pretentious, it's ridiculous. But it's the way Chuck Norris plays it. I think he knew, look, this is ridiculous, and I don't care. So he just went with it. So because look, his younger brother helped write the script and stuff like that. I think Aaron Norris did a lot of Chuck stuff, and I've always sort of took that as Chuck's way of not having his name tied to it, but having say in how things went on the story.
That seems like a very reasonable thing to me. I mean, his brother was also one of the producers on Walker, Texas Ranger. His brother was the writer of like Lone Wolf McQuade.
McQuade.
Yeah, or some kind of crew on like he was a producer on Lone Wolf McQuade. I'm sorry.
But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I like the balance of the humor and stuff here, and they do give him one scene. We said the thing that makes this work mostly is that they don't ask Chuck Norris to act, really, and that's a wise move because I don't know that he really can, but they give him this one thing where all you see is him in the CIA suit again at this. It looks to have been like your standard, county fair or whatever that has been gunned to pieces. Like, there's no bodies or anything and no police tape, but there's just like signs of explosions on the tilt-a-whirl.
As if that wasn't every tilt-a-whirl.
Yes.
Every county fair.
I know. I mean, I remember watching this and going, that looks pretty much like they look all the time. I don't think they had to. I'm sure when they got the material, like the day they rented it, they're like, that'll just do. We can just shoot that.
Yeah, we were going to rub some soot on it, but now I guess we don't really have to.
Yeah, it seems to have come with its own. So I can see the production meeting where the designer goes to Joseph Zito, the director of such gems as Friday the 13th, the final chapter, and says to him, "Hey Joe, we don't have to dirty up the carnival equipment. Who knew?" So. But it is this moment though where they ask him to emote. Like, he acts like he's mad because he can't stop every single attack. And this is when, if the CIA suit had any sense at all, he would go, "Well, this is what you get for working alone. If you would tell us all the stuff that you apparently know, that might help us thwart the plan." Because what happens in the third act is the most amazing part of this. All 50 governors from around the U.S., not the president, not the Joint Chiefs, the state governors. Was this the Reagan 80s or what? The governors band together to decide what they're going to do with the National Guards. That's how this goes down. The Army doesn't get involved. The National Guard gets involved.
I'm just going to believe that they chose to do governors because they couldn't get the Army's permission to use any, equipment or uniforms, or they got absolutely no cooperation from the U.S. Army. They're like, well, who can we get? I don't know. Georgia National Guard's not doing anything. All right, let's National Guard then. National Guard solve the state problems. Federalism.
Yeah, that's what I love though. And I've always read that as this though, is that well in America our military is so BA that like our weekend warriors can take out the terrorists. You know,
That works too.
which is totally the opposite of like First Blood, which is if you've ever seen that movie, I mean, and if you've read the book subsequently, John Rambo like destroys that National Guard. He kills all of them in the book, and he pretty much does in the film too. It just doesn't show any of it, and it's kind of implied violence, so where he could have whacked them, but he didn't, or whatever, because that's Stallone's shtick. But I mean, that was the thing, is that you put these guys up here against me, and this is what's going to happen. And I've got family that have served in both the Guard and the full-time regular Army stuff, and they'll all tell you, these Guardsmen they're the real deal. They do some good stuff. But if you put them up against a real military, that's just not going to last really long. That's like people that say like college teams could beat pro teams. No, they couldn't. The worst pro team would mop any good college team off the floor. It's just how it works. And that's the difference here. But I do find that humorous that it's the National Guard that ultimately gets in the game and saves the day. And I take that as very much, again, part of the Reagan 80s states' rights, less big government part of the world. I mean, it's a different time. You could not make that today and anyone buy it at all.
No, not at all. I mean, just look at the flack that Avengers got for not having the Army involved.
Oh, well, look at the flack like Man of Steel got for all the destruction in the city.
Oh, right.
Yeah, still getting that flack. And yeah, somewhat deservedly so. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like, at what point would the military not intervene? I mean, when 9/11 happened, commercial airlines were done by 11 o'clock that day. I mean,
right.
There was nothing moving. There was nothing going on. This goes on for seemingly, weeks? And everything's just kind of rolling along. Hope we don't get attacked today on the way to the supermarket.
But they did have that one scene where there was a food shortage.
Yeah, they were rationing food because apparently there had been some kind of supply line cut. But yet no one looked like they were really – I mean, that didn't look like hunger strike going on out there. It was more like, we don't have 2 loaves of bread today. So,
yeah, what it looked like to me is it looked like an attempt to stop people from panicking and buying everything in the store.
Exactly.
The usual it's going to snow kind of calamity that happens in the South.
Indeed. And this last winter is a grand example of that. So, great point. Now, we got to talk about one of the attacks, though, that really sort of sums up the Act 2 ends with him sad at the carnival that's been blown up. But let's talk about the attack on the shopping mall, can we? Because you've already called it the Blues Brothers driving through the shopping mall attack. That is one of the best orchestrated action scenes in this film. And it is definitely what I think of when I think of Golan Globus at their best, is staging these things where you've got trucks and cars and glass blowing everywhere and guns and just, I mean, there's a full-fledged firefight in the middle of the Regency Square Mall or whatever it is. And I am thoroughly entertained by everything that goes on here because Matt Hunter can drive his 4x4 truck with one arm, shoot a MAC-10 Uzi, which is an incredibly unreliable weapon as far as like shooting straight, out the window with his left hand, and he's taking people down like Doc Holliday.
Well, he still has his I don't know if you noticed, but his Uzis are on a customized shoulder rig. So there's like a the reason why he's holding them so close to his body is because there's like a stabilizing strap to keep them in place.
Right.
So I figure that's magic. That's a magical leather strap.
The only other one that's more magical is the one that Stallone wears at the end of Cobra, if you've ever seen that. So, and the JT Matic that he rolls out and takes down the motorcycle gang with axe murder going on too. We'll maybe get to that one day too. There's a lot to talk about in that film. But I don't know. I love the whole shootout at the shopping mall here. I think it's well done and it's well staged again. And this is when martial law gets declared because it's not until then. Like nothing else has brought it out. But dadgummit, you interrupt the Christmas shopping in America and it's martial law.
That's when you know it's trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Black Friday has now been destroyed by the terrorists, so they must intervene.
The Avondale Mall and the store's anchor, like under the anchor section when it talks about the mall, it talks about the Invasion USA footage, the Sears had apparently closed and they were going to renovate. So while they were renovating the mall, they decided to just shoot a Chuck Norris movie in the mall. So he crashes through the mall's main entrance. He drives around near like one end of the mall. The escalator scene was shot inside the Sears building, and then the exit crash was out through the Sears on the first level. So basically, they were like, "Well, we're rebuilding this Sears. Can we just wreck it?" And the mall was like, "Sure, Chuck Norris. We love cocaine."
I think a lot of those things mixed together to probably make that decision. And maybe he just did some good renovation for him. It's like, look, we don't even have to bring guys in. Chuck's just going to drive through it. So I'm convinced that the housing project that gets destroyed at the beginning of Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift was soon to be leveled, and they just let the Lucas Black kid and the kid from Home Improvement just drive through it, destroy it. So it's not uncommon to see in a film. But yeah, you know what? Hey, they're going to blow it up for us anyway. Yeah, sure. So what would be funny is if you could go see that mall today to see if they had pictures or plaques of Invasion USA.
Sadly, no. After the terrorist attack, the mall's business declined.
I would say that probably would, yeah. So, I mean, every airline in this country took a nosedive stock-wise after 9/11. Not to be a bad pun there with nosedive, but I mean, really, they all did. Like those companies are never going to be the same. So after that, I don't think the Sears would be rocking and rolling. So much more after this attack that went down. But it is the big attack. And then finally, like we said, the governors have rallied together in Atlanta, and they've got a way to thwart the terror attacks. And the FBI takes Hunter into custody because they want him to tell them basically how he's killed the Nico guy, and how he's essentially brought the terrorism down to the leaders just crazy and looking for me. So the reason they take him in, is it really just so they can draw Rostov out? Because doesn't he goes on the news and says something about like, come and get me or something like that. It's very Rocky 3.
That was the only thing I could think, is to lure him into this secure-ish location and kind of try to close the gates on him, so to speak. That seems to be the best explanation for it I could come up with. I mean, to me, it seemed like the 50 states, the governors are meeting together thing felt like just an elaborate plot anyway. Like there were actually no governors there. They just made it up.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, there's a closed room that I think has like a sign that's printed on like a dot matrix printer that says governors only or something. So, because I mean, they never go to that meeting. Where any of them would have been deciding this. It's just, again, it's told through news exposition. But this is all so we can get two things. We can get the big blowout with the National Guard and the would-be army, if you will, of terrorists, and where they all just at one point just lay down arms, at the right moment because they know that they're done. So, yeah. Which clearly does not, that never happens, but whatever. And we get the cat and mouse through the building with Hunter and Rostov. And this is what gets me, is Rostov chooses as his weapon of choice in a closed quarters, weapons battle. He didn't pick up a pistol. He didn't get an automatic rifle. No, he has a bazooka, a straight up one-shot bazooka that he's going to chase Hunter around the building with.
It's the Golden Eye.
You know what? I hadn't thought about that. That's where they ripped this off from. I knew it. I knew there was a reason I liked that game. So, but yeah. It's way better than that movie, I'll tell you that. But the game gave that film a whole life it never had. So, yeah. But yeah, they chase each other around, and I do like how Hunter is so. He, it's not only him and Rostov, it's the boss battle, right? So he's got to go through all these other people too, and at one point he has a grenade launcher and he shoots two guys through two separate walls at the same time just by sweeping it. I was like, see, years before Wanted came up with it, before Angelina Jolie was bending bullets, Chuck Norris was bending rocket propelled grenades.
Well, that's, just another brick in the Chuck Norris meme building. It's just
Chuck has control of all physics. He's the Matrix. So
Right.
at this point, well, he might as well have been. Some of the stuff he was doing, and the fact that he has this one little cut above his eye that sort of trickles blood. And it's like, man, I mean, that's the one thing I think I always appreciated about John McClane is at the end of Die Hard films, he looked like he'd been run over a couple of times, as you would. It's the one thing I always loved about Predator, too. At the end of that, Arnold Schwarzenegger looked terrible. So as he should have in every other film he walked out of. But
Chuck Norris, Chuck Norris doesn't bleed.
Well, but apparently he does. But it stops in its track. It's like the blood knows it's got to go back in. So it makes like a U-turn on his face.
The blood retreated out of fear.
Exactly. The fear of Chuck's beard. So we get nowhere near that. So he sneaks up behind Rostov. And this is what gets me is Rostov has a weapon armed, ready to go. What Hunter is going to kill him with is commonly referred to as the Law Rocket. Now, when we get into our Dirty Harry retrospective, we're going to learn a lot about the Law Rocket. There's going to be a whole scene on it because Clint got obsessed with him apparently and stuck him in one of those. But it's like 3 pieces. You have to unhook the back of it, slide out the tube, flip it open, and then it's ready to fire. In those 3 actions take at least a minute and a half for him to do. Now, it may only take like a skilled person maybe a minute to pull it off, but Chuck draws it out. But at no time does Rostov realize if I just turn around and shoot, this guy can't fire on me because he doesn't have the rocket armed. So that's what got me is I was like, if only Rostov had just swung around a little earlier, he would have had a shot.
He was trying to make a dramatic entrance, I guess.
I guess so, but that's what gets me is he stops him and then he does the whole "it's time" again. And I love Richard Lynch's. I don't know if it was his idea or if Joseph Zito said you need to do something here, dramatic, and all he can come up with is, it's like Cobra Commander.
Yeah, it's like you stepped on Cobra Commander's cat. It makes that noise.
He shoots him, and what gets me is that they bother with the special effect of the window blowing out, and apparently had like your 9th grade science class skeleton going out the window with it because there's pieces of bone and a head and all this stuff. And I'm not a weapons expert, but I'm pretty sure that rocket would have probably just gone through him.
Yeah, you would think that, or if the rocket had hit him and it had triggered the pressure explosion, it would have there would be no whole skeleton. There would be like charred bits.
Moreover, Chuck Norris is, would you say, 10 feet from him? Maybe. Chuck would have something on him. Like there would be pieces of Rostov on Chuck's, but we haven't even talked about his blue jean shirt and blue jeans.
Yeah, the Canadian Special Forces uniform. Well, I mean, clearly that's just another example of Chuck Norris's control of the laws of physics.
There's a wall around him; it just bounces off of him.
Right, he just looks at the explosion and it kind of bends around him like Invisible Girl and
Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four, yeah.
He's Sue Storm now too, so he's or Bella in Twilight if you've seen any of that. So because she can do the same thing. So spoiler anyway. So.
I can't believe you just spoiled America's like the most classic film series ever.
But that's how it ends, though. That's what gets me is that there's no like big scene at the end where he's walking through the turmoil and the hot reporter. Like, where does she go? He kills Nico in the parking lot. She's like, "Thanks a lot, cowboy," and we never see Melissa Prophet again. She's just out of this story. Did she have something else to go shoot?
I kind of doubt that.
I know. I'm like, she is gone from this film. I needed her to run up at the end and like at least try to hit on him again. And him like, man, not interested. I'm going back to the swamp with my armadillo, or maybe just pick the armadillo up and get in a military truck and drive off. So all we see is Chuck standing out the window as the army or as the National Guard rounds up what's left of the terrorists in Atlanta, and that credits roll.
She should have come staggering out from behind a sandbag covered in little pieces of raw stuff.
Yeah, with her camera,
right,
taking pictures. Because that's sort of her old character motivation is to wear boots and to take pictures. So, I think we're at the part of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Invasion USA?
I have to say that this is probably I've said it before, and I can't emphasize it enough. This is like the best possible usage of Chuck Norris. He shows up and he looks awesome. He fires a bunch of interesting looking guns at a bunch of vaguely ethnic people, and then stuff blows up and he leaves, and he said 10 words through the whole movie. I think the whole purpose of the reporter girl was to have someone talking on screen while he says yes, no, go away, Rostov, time to die. I mean, this is clearly a movie designed to make a talking Chuck Norris doll, because you could cram everything he says in the film onto the memory chip of one of those 80s pull the string dolls.
Yes.
Like a Talkie Tina type, but with Chuck Norris with little plastic Uzis. But all that aside, it's really a fun movie. Fun in a nihilistic sort of way. It's like, the ultimate Golan Globus cocaine action movie blowout. I gotta give it a large popcorn. I gotta go a large popcorn because I had a good time, and there was no plot to get in the way of the action, as Joe Bob Briggs always said.
I will say this. Of the Chuck Norris 80s action run, this one is a hidden gem amongst them. I think it's a forgotten one. I don't know how many people know about this film. But I agree with you that it is one that if you're into that kind of thing, if you like those types of films, this should be seen. It should be owned. It should be in your rotation. You and I are going to personally spike the sales of this on Amazon, by the way. Somebody at What's Left of Canon Films is going to go, what the heck? We need another one. But anyway, so I agree with you. It is one of the best ones of that era of Norris. And it's a lot of fun. And I'll say this too. I think there's actually something here. I know they can't do it anymore because the circumstances just today we'd never believe, most of this going on or whatever. But if there ever comes a time again when we're at a place of peace where we can, have entertainment that's as goofy as this is with such, serious issues as domestic terrorism and stuff like that, this would be one to go back and revisit because I think there's a story here too. I mean, I think if you actually had people that could act, you could have a real fun story with the Rostov versus Hunter tale before they ever wind up, chasing each other with rocket launchers in Atlanta. So,
you could definitely flesh this out into a really good movie.
Yeah, I mean, really, like get somebody like Tom Hardy in it, something like that. I mean, you could have some good stuff with this, and so I am going to join you in that bucket of large popcorn. I normally would say that there's nothing large popcornish about anything Golan Globus because they seem to be like geared to be medium or small popcorns from the start, but occasionally because of circumstances and just the right time and stuff, things work. And this is definitely a film that is a product of its time, but if you can go there with it, and especially if you remember it like you and I do, it's very enjoyable to watch, and I'd say it's a lot of fun. And again, there's nothing to get in the way of a good action. That's the problem today is good action films get ruined by the unnecessary personal subplot of my girlfriend's also cheating on me or, whatever else, or the high school quarterback and, whatever, all this other stuff that, plot. So as they say, this one just gets right down to it, and it lasts a good while too. So it's a lot of fun. I'm going to join you with the large popcorn. Now they have a sequel to this that I didn't know existed till you told me it did. And Michael Dudikoff is going to take up the reins as Mad Hunter. And I am, we've had an interesting run here with Dudikoff in the 3 of the American Ninja films he was in. I think we actually gave him kind of a pass on the second and the last one for being, okay for what they were. But I'm curious to see if there was something else to do, because I'll tell you, this Matt Hunter character always reminded me of like what I would see in the dime store, like action novel paperbacks, Mac Bolan and the 44 Killer and all this stuff, these action heroes.
Stony Man.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, I could see this guy having other adventures. So much like I did the American Ninjas. So I'm like, okay, I see this movie. It made some money and it was a success. I mean, it got like another 11 million in the domestic, rental stuff. Cause this was when, renting movies became a huge thing in the mid 80s. And so this one had a whole other life after that. So I could see why Golan Globus said, yeah, let's do another one. Let's do a sequel to that. And Chuck wanted no part of it. So they came back with Michael Dudikoff because, he had some extra time, I guess.
Chuck was down, but he was busy shooting. I believe he was shooting Delta Force.
Oh, very interesting.
So he was already trapped up in another Golden Globe-y movie. So they're like, well, who do we have just hanging around in the Philippines? Oh, right, it's good old what's his name.
So, can he grow a beard? Nah. So, but
we don't have time for him to grow a beard.
Exactly.
He's got to get back and finish shooting American Ninja 3.
Exactly. So, because that one, so does Steve James for that matter. So we're going to get him back. There's going to be lots of stuff. I'm looking forward to talking about Avenging Force because it's rare to find a new thing for me, and I am excited about the idea of a new movie, or at least something new to me to talk about on this next show. So, folks, thanks for joining us on this latest edition of Film Strip. You can find more episodes at our website, continuousplaypodcast.com. There you'll find links to the Film Strip show, to the Famous Factor Film Podcast. You'll also find links to The Art of Slaying, our Buffy the Vampire Slayer retrospective, and Squared Circle Flashbacks, Brian Thomas's wrestling podcast. It's our latest venture from Continuous Play. As always, you can hook up with us on Facebook or Twitter. Let us know what you think of the show and leave us a review on iTunes. It helps other people find the podcast. Until next time, for Ron, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Film Strip.